Hello everyone, X4 here, and welcome back to the channel for the JOJOLands Chapter 19 review. So yes, I am a bit late to this one, as this is the September chapter, although because the series was on hiatus in October, and I was already late to this review due to some health reasons, I figured I would give you guys this chapter review right before the series returned. So if you read this chapter 2 months ago, now you've got my take on it and a whole refresher of what's going on, and we'll have a brand new chapter next week. And that'll lead us into some more consistent content for the rest of the year, as we also have a brand new JoJo magazine releasing next month with a whole bunch of new content to discuss, which was probably the reason why the JoJoLands was on hiatus last month, as Araki has already started teasing the new cover art and some stuff he's been working on for it. So it has been a while, guys. Let's just get right into chapter 19. Starting with the cover page, we have Jodio and Paco scouting things out, and the chapter title is Glory Days Part 1. So this is a continuation of the Lulu and Bobby Jean fight for the most part, although what I found most interesting about this chapter actually comes right at the beginning, which is another Howler scene. But this time not directly of Aka, rather it's a short biographical narration about the history of his family and how they came to power through Howler Co., which gives us a ton of interesting details that straight up answers some of the mysteries already present in the story and gives insight into those that remain unanswered. But overall, it's just a huge lore dump right at the beginning here, and we love lore. So the story begins 5 generations ago with Aka's great-great-great-grandfather, a sailor born in Italy with the last name Letrato. So we have that confirmation that Aka does come from Italian descent, something many had already suspected due to his Zeppeli-esque facial hair and the name Aka having Italian origin. So the year is 1843, that's nearly 50 years before the Steel Ball Run, where Letrato, at the age of 42, would be in a sailing accident and wash up on the northern side of Hawaii. And although Letrato had nothing to his name, he would do well for himself on these new lands, quickly falling in love with an island girl and gaining the trust of the royal Hawaiian family, then started a farm on the northern slope of Hualalai where he would get married and start a family of his own. So although the northern slope of Hualalai was terrible farmland, dry and scattered in volcanic rock, Letrato was born with a natural intuition when it came to terrain. So instead of building traditional vertical wells into the ground, he instead decided to dig directly into the mountain, as he suspected it could be accumulating rainwater. So for months, day after day, Letrato would dig into the mountain until he eventually found these underground connecting waterways that quickly transformed the terrain of volcanic rock into flourishing meadows. The Letrato family would grow over the years, and in 1959, when Hawaii officially joined the United States, they changed their family name to Howler, as Letrato translated to howling in English. And after changing their name, the family launched Howler Farms, and going into the 1960s with all these new opportunities from joining the United States, the Howler family would grow substantially, with their water supply being a cornerstone to the tourism economy, and therefore began to get favorable treatment from the government and politicians. And riding this momentum, Howler Farms established the water power and resource company Howler Co., expanding their business into the other islands, port rights, transportation, and munitions industry. And within this time, the power of Howler had grown so much it essentially became free from government intervention and regulations because of the irreplaceable value they provide to their land and local industries. Environmental violations and even missing persons they'll turn the other cheek to if it's on Howler's land. And that brings us all the way to the 6th generation head of the Howler family, Aka, who is in the midst of having this generational legacy stolen away from him by a bunch of knuckleheads. So now that we know that whole backstory, we can do some game theory here. So we now know the origin of the lava tubes. They are man-made holes created by Howler's ancestors that allow water to nurture the lands of Hualalai. And this doesn't seem to be public knowledge either, considering how surprised Charmy was by the flowing water on the mountain. But because this narration is presented like a biography and not a primary source, I would assume we are missing out on a few key details about the family history, as we know that the magical lava rock originates from the northern slope of Hualalai. That's where Rohan had found the rock in a restricted area. So I think it's safe to assume, for now, that the great-grandfather Letrato was the one who originally found these lava rocks during his many months of digging out the tubes, which would explain why after creating the lava tubes, the Howler family only grew and became more successful each and every generation, to where now they pretty much have total control over the entire archipelago, starting from just a water source in the mountain. And in present day, Aka is fully aware of their existence and their power, so at some point in his life he was also introduced to them. And continuing with this assumption that the lava rock is originally a part of Hualalai, I believe that gives some more insight into its purpose, as its perceived power is to draw in value according to the desires of its owner. When humans have the rock, it draws in money and things worth money, although without human influence, existing in its natural state, what is the rock's purpose? What would the mountain consider value other than rainwater, a commodity that allows its land and ecosystems to survive and grow? This interpretation also connects to the concept of mechanisms, which is how Rohan and Jodio describe its power. And in chapter 1, Jodio's narration tells us he prefers the word mechanism because it's similar to an ecosystem. So I would guess in a natural state, the rock nurtures ecosystems, drawing in resources like rainwater to accommodate life and grow the land around it, similar to how when owned by a human, it controls society and people's actions to fulfill desires. And I think that works really well on a fundamental level for the part's themes of land ownership, as this magic rock which benefits nature can be taken away from nature and exploited by humans for material wealth, potentially a metaphor for how humanity has chronically mistreated the environment for the sake of making money, especially on a corporate level. And wow, hey look, the main bad guy just so happens to be the CEO of a billion-dollar company that exploits land. So overall, I'm very satisfied with this lore dump, and I thought it was extremely insightful and just adds more lore to the alternate universe in general. It's really cool to see events that predate even part 7, and I'm just loving how Araki is handling Howler specifically, making sure this family, this presence, and Aka are incorporated into the story early, telling us about their history, their connection to the past and present day, how the family rose to power, all their history. It's very refreshing seeing both sides of the story and not really wondering so much about who this villain is and what's their motivation. It's all being presented very well. And following this flashback, we transition into the main scene of the chapter, which picks things up at the hospital fight right where we left off, with Paco falling down the elevator shaft. Meanwhile, Jodio apparently didn't hear Paco's loud ass screams warning him about the old guy and little girl, so he's still looking out for the enemy stand users, but quickly makes contact with Lulu, who stumbles in front of him, dropping her hula dancer, which Jodio picks up, an important detail for later. And while all seems normal, Lulu's cover is blown when her nose starts to bleed and she nervously glances over at the rest of the gang, revealing herself as the enemy. But before Jodio can react, he's attacked from behind by Glory Days, although he's able to stop the attack by using November Rain to create this thin waterfall of raindrops that almost acts like a veil protecting him from the attack, deflecting all of the bullets and damaging anyone who comes close to the veil. It almost has like a love train effect to it visually. So I remember saying early in the part that Jodio feels a bit limited with a stand that can only create heavy rain, but seeing stuff like this reminds me why Araki is the GOAT, and I even want to share this piece of fan art I saw when this chapter came out that gives you an idea of how slick this interaction really would look animated, so shout out to Twitter user Mayester. And from this point, everything just starts to go to shit as Bobby completely exposes himself, hitting an innocent bystander with about a dozen witnesses, so mission certainly failed on the whole stealth part, and I'm not sure if he's going to be able to return to his family life after this one, might be a fugitive now, but he continues to chase Jodio throughout the hospital. Meanwhile, the rest of the gang are still working on Usagi's MRI, which is somewhat helpful in locating the enemy stand, although this is the third chapter now we are trying to get this MRI done with Usagi either passed out or flailing around, and I'm honestly just not that interested in how Araki has been using these three characters, as they're mostly removed from the fight and have just been dealing with small problem after small problem relating to the MRI, like needing to make the machine and not knowing how to work it, getting a bunch of metals sucked in. It all just feels more annoying than anything else and turns out to not even be helpful in the end, as when Dragona is able to identify the bag's groove in Usagi, we get this twist reveal that there's actually multiple inside of him. So with Dragona outnumbered, it leaves them all in a desperate situation, as there now could also be more bag's groove inside Dragona and Charming Man, depending on how many stands Lulu's toy was carrying, as it looks like she set the head of her toy as a trap and threw it over there and it got, pulled in by the MRI machine. So really their only option at this point is to go after the stand user, because Lulu can just continue to infect them if they're not looking for her. But it shouldn't be too hard for them to deal with that at this point, because Bobby did leave her alone. All they have to do is find the girl holding the broken doll. So my main issue is that from the start the plans seem pretty scuffed, and then we spend hella long trying to get the machine to work, and the second we actually find the enemy, turns out we're outnumbered and we can't do anything about it. So the end result just feels like a lot of stalling until Dragona and Charmy could actually be useful again, and I bet now they'll start looking for Lulu, as this would be the perfect opportunity with Bobby preoccupied. And the remainder of the chapter is Bobby Jean chasing Jodio throughout the hospital, which gives us some pretty slick stand v stand action with Bobby's surprise attacks and gravity-defying bullets, and Jodio continuing to deflect with his waterfalls. And the chapter then comes to an end with Jodio retreating into a bathroom stall and begins realizing realizing that he's suffering from a pulmonary edema, the first signs that you're being attacked by the bag's grooves. As earlier, we saw the stand had attached to Jodio's fingers because Lulu planted them on her doll before dropping it in front of Jodio. So now it looks like everyone besides Paco is being attacked by Lulu. So I expect in the next chapter, Paco is sort of this ace in the hole, maybe he takes the stairs, rejoins the fight to save the day, and he also knows exactly who the enemies are. So while it may seem desperate, I think the gang are primed for a comeback in the next chapter, and we should be able to see the end of this fight, especially with the two separated. That's a big deal. So overall, a very short chapter, just 40 pages, and I think the intro flashback really was the star here. Don't get me wrong, I like the Bobby and Lulu duo, but there are just a few things about this arc I'm not completely vibing with. The first being Lulu's stand, Bag's groove, this Lovers 2.0. I just don't find it all that interesting, especially how it's not allowing the characters to be proactive or to make clever decisions. Just a lot of stalling, it feels like, and it doesn't result in any counterplay. It feels very much like it's only here to apply pressure to the current situation. Like we saw with Jodio at the end of the chapter, it introduces this like countdown to the fight where he needs to end things quickly before the stand does more damage, otherwise you just get removed from the arc like we saw with Usagi. And my second issue is the setting. JoJo in Hawaii. I was expecting all of these exotic and tropical and fantastical locations, and our first major enemy arc, we're stuck in a hospital. Maybe I'm just jaded by JoJolian, but get me the hell out of here, man.
Free me from this prison, dude.
But be sure to let me know your guys' thoughts on all things Chapter 19 as we prepare for Chapter 20, which is coming in just a few days now. Any predictions, anything I missed, any twists you see coming. So yeah, be sure to like the video. Thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Subscribe for more, and I'll talk to you all real soon. All right, peace.